vision or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Debbie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from current issues of the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First sets of articles comes from Tuesday, December 16th. Our first article is Ford scraps plans for fully electric F-150 Lightning. Ford Motor Company is pivoting away from its once ambitious electric vehicle plans amid financial losses and waning consumer demand for the vehicle in lieu of investment in more efficient gasoline engines and hybrid EVs, the company said Monday. The Detroit automaker, which has poured billions of dollars into electrification along with most of its industry peers, says it will no longer make the F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck, instead opting for an extended range version of the vehicle. Ford will also introduce some manufacturing changes at its Tennessee Electric Vehicle Center, part of the Blue Oval City campus, and once the future of Ford's EVs and batteries is being renamed the Tennessee Truck Plant and will produce new affordable gas-powered trucks instead. Ford's Ohio Assembly Plant will produce a new gas and hybrid van. The company has lost $13 billion on EVs since 2023 and said it expects to take a $19.5 billion hit largely in the fourth quarter due to the EV business. This is a customer-driven shift to create a stronger, more resilient, and more profitable Ford, CEO Jim Farley said in a statement. The operating reality has changed, and we are redeploying capital into higher return growth opportunities, Ford Pro, our market-leading trucks and vans, hybrids, and high-margin opportunities like our new battery engine storage business. Ford said it now expects half of its global volume will be hybrids, extended range EVs, which also incorporate a gas-powered engine, and full EVs by 2030, up from 17% this year. Ford's elimination of the electric F-150 Lightning is not much of a surprise after the truck failed to come close to filling the plant's capacity. Ford's choice to convert an existing gas-powered truck to accept the electric drivetrain helped reduce their upfront costs, which in hindsight was the right move, Sam Fiorani, vice president at Auto Forecast Solutions, told the United Press. For months, the future of Blue Oval City has been in question, and this announcement locks in the direction of this large plant, Fiorani added. Adding an affordable vehicle to the Ford lineup fills a glaring gap in the market. Several other automakers have made changes to their electrified product plans in recent years as consumer demands for EVs in the U.S. hasn't quite met expectations. EVs accounted for almost 8% of new vehicle sales in the U.S. last year, but factors such as cost and charging infrastructure remains concerns for mainstream buyers. The average transaction price for a new EV last month was $58,638, compared with $49,814 for a new vehicle overall, according to auto buying resource Kelley Blue Book. Meanwhile, while public charging availability has improved, the industry has relied on home charging as a selling point for prospective buyers, and not everyone has access to charging at home. Since taking office for a second time, President Donald Trump has drastically shifted U.S. policy away from EVs, calling EV-friendly policy set under former President Joe Biden a mandate. Though Biden-era policies include generous tax incentive for consumers and tailpipe and fuel economy rules for automakers encourage the EV adoption, no policies required the industry to sell or Americans to buy EVs. Biden targeted half of the new vehicle sales in the U.S. to be electric by 2030. The Trump administration has since slashed that target, eliminated EV tax credits, and proposed weakening the emissions and gas mileage rules. The 1-2 punch of the public's slow EV adoption and the Trump administration's softer stance on fuel economy and emissions has encouraged every automaker to rethink their current direction, Fiorani added. Electric vehicles are still the future, But the transition to EVs was always going to take longer than automakers have been promising the public. Continuing on, Rob Reiner's son arrested after the director and the wife found dead. Rob Reiner's younger son, Nick Reiner, was in custody Monday after being booked for what investigators believed was the fatal stabbing of the director-actor and his wife at their Los Angeles home a day earlier, authorities said. It was not immediately clear what charges Nick Reiner, age 32, would face. Online records show that he remained in jail on Monday. Police Chief Jim McDonnell said he is being held on $4 million bail. Representatives for the Reiner family did not immediately respond to a request for comment, and it wasn't immediately clear if Nick Reiner had an attorney who could speak on his behalf. Nick Reiner has spoken publicly of his struggles with addiction. By 18, he had cycled in and out of treatment facilities with bouts of homelessness and relapses in between. Rob and Nick Reiner explored their difficult relationship, and Nick Reiner struggles with drugs in a semi-autobiographical 2016 film called Being Charlie. Rob and Michelle Singer Reiner were found dead Sunday at their home in Los Angeles, and investigators believe that they suffered stab wounds. A law enforcement official told the Associated Press. The official who was briefed on the investigation confirmed that Nick Reiner was being held but could not publicly discuss the details and spoke to AP on condition of anonymity. Anonymously. Reiner was long one of the most prolific directors in Hollywood, and his work included some of the most memorable movies of the 1980s and 90s, including This Is Spinal Tap, A Few Good Men, When Harry Met Sally, and The Princess Bride. His role as Michael Meathead Stivic in Norman Lear's 1970s TV classic All in the Family, as a liberal foil to Carol O'Connor's Archie Bunker, catapulted him to fame and won him 2 Emmys. The son of comedy legend Carl Reiner, Rob Reiner married photographer Michelle Singer Reiner in 1989. The two met while they were directing When Harry Met Sally. They had 3 children together, Nick, Jake, and Rami. Reiner told the New York Times in 1989 that the cinematographer on When Harry Met Sally, Barry Sonnenfein, predicted that he would marry her. I look over and I see this girl and whoa, I was immediately attracted, Reiner said. Michelle Singer Reiner was a producer for Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues, God and Country, Albert Brooks' Defending My Life, and Shock and Awe, according to IMDb. Earlier in her career, she photographed the cover image of President Donald Trump's 1987 bestseller, The Art of the Deal. Trump on Monday blamed Rob Reiner's outspoken opposition to the president for the actor-director's killing, delivering the unsubstantiated claim in a social media post that seemed intent on decrying his opponents, even in the face of a tragedy. Relatives of Lear, the legendary producer who died in 2023, said their deaths left them bereft. Norman often referred to Rob as a son, and their close relationship was extraordinary to us in the world, said a Lear family statement. Norman would have wanted to remind us that Rob and Michelle spent every single breath trying to make this country a better place, and they pursued that through their art, their activism, their philanthropy, and their love for family and friends. Killings are rare in the Brentwood neighborhood. The scene is about a mile from the home where O.J. Simpson's wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman, were killed in 1994. Next article. A lawsuit says UPS ripped off seasonal workers. UPS stole tens of millions of dollars in pay from seasonal workers who helped to deliver the shipping giant's packages during the busy holiday season, forcing some to clock in well after their shift started and deducting pay for lunch breaks they never took. New York Attorney General Letitia James alleged in a lawsuit. Filed in state court in Manhattan, the lawsuit accuses UPS of repeatedly and persistently failing to properly compensate driver helpers who assist with deliveries and seasonal support drivers who use their own vehicles to make deliveries. James estimated that in the last 6 years, UPS has deprived tens of thousands of seasonal workers of wages, totaling about $45 million. The lawsuit seeks back pay and penalties, plus a court order requiring UPS to end off-the-clock work and change its timekeeping and payroll practices. The company, known for its brown trucks and uniforms, delivered an average of 22.4 million packages a day and brought in $91.1 billion in revenue last year, according to its website. We oftentimes don't think of these workers when we're opening up our gifts for the holidays, James said at a news conference announcing the lawsuit, and these individuals are struggling each and every day to make ends meet. In a statement, Georgia-based UPS said it was aware of the lawsuit, takes all accusations of wrongdoing seriously, and denies the unfounded allegations of intentionally underpaying UPS employees. We offer industry-leading pay and benefits to our more than 26,000 employees in New York, and we remain committed to following all applicable laws, the statement said. James, a Democrat, said she started investigating UPS in 2023 after an employee union, Teamsters Local 804, raised concerns about the company's treatment of seasonal workers. These workers are employed on a temporary basis from October to January. Josh Pomerantz, the union's director of operations, said that while there isn't evidence that the company's top management was involved in, aware of, or condoning alleged wage theft, there are just certain practices that you have to actively ignore not to see it happening. Moving on to our next issue. These articles are coming from the Friday, December 19th issue. Landmark status approved. This article is written by Heidi Truschel-Light. After listening to heartfelt testimony about the value of St. Patrick's Church, the Common Council unanimously approved local landmark status for the 160-year-old Gothic Revival House of Worship. The landmark application was submitted to the council by Selena Truex Morello, chair of the City of Lockport's Historical Preservation Commission. While the church has not been sold or slated for demolition, members of the public spoke of the loss that would result if it were not preserved intact. "We don't really want to risk losing more of our buildings and heritage," said resident Kathy O'Keefe. Speaking of the former Catholic church on Walnut Street, O'Keefe says, "I was at the chapel at the time that we took over St. Mary's, and thankfully that has been somewhat saved and become part of the community again. I will say one of the hardest things for me to watch when they decided to dismantle the altar. They took apart the statue of Jesus laying there, and they numbered each piece of marble, and they shipped it to Nicaragua. St. Patrick's to me is so phenomenal," O'Keefe said. "You can walk in there and you can feel our past as an Irish-American girl. And the problem with it going on the auction block or up for sale is you're not guaranteed that any of that will be saved." In speaking on behalf of the church's lengthy history, Shelley Richards, a commission member, clarified that the church is consecrated and is permanently referred to as St. Patrick's, while the congregation is known as All Saints Parish. John Tolley of Royal Parkway South read a letter from Preservation Buffalo Niagara, PBN, in unequivocal support of landmark status, recognizing St. Patrick's role as a defining visual feature in the city. The letter was written by former Lockport resident and PBM preservation planner Emily Jarnot. The church represents not only an effort to honor one of Lockport's most historic structures, but also a critical step in ensuring its survival for future generations, PBN said. It's essential to the city's architectural fabric. Local landmark designation is more than symbolic. It is a practice tool that opens the door to essential funding opportunities, including sacred site grants, which are often restricted to properties with former historical designation. These resources are urgently needed, particularly as the bell tower requires significant repair. PNN said, without landmark status, the parish and community are denied access to the very funding streams that could stabilize and preserve this irreplaceable building. We must also acknowledge the broader context. The Catholic Diocese's ongoing sale of church properties, often encumbered by restrictive covenants, has created troubling incentives for demolition rather than preservation. Too many of our historic churches have been lost to the wrecking ball, not because they lack value, but because they lack protection. Tolley added his personal comment to the testimony. When I come into the city, like many others, I can't help but be impressed with the skyline above the locks, he said. St. Patrick's is a beacon of love. It's a beacon of peace. It's a beacon of friendship and community. Lockport has been working towards having a historical economic development in the downtown area, said Regina Rosati. We should really be looking toward having this become a very, very much historic 1980s city, and it will be of great economic value if we can pull everything that's historic together and kind of build a corridor in this area. Everything downtown can be recreated to look like the 1800s. We've already found what happens when you take away buildings that can't be recreated. You can't make that church ever again. I really think losing it would be a shame. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Continuing on, Hochul is back on the list. This is written by Mark Shearer. Niagara Falls Mayor Robert Restaino has made a statewide government transparency advocacy group's 2025 naughty list for comments he made earlier this year, in which he suggested his administration was ignoring requests for public information from the Niagara Gazette because he did not like the newspaper's coverage. Restaino was joined on this year's list, released on Thursday by the nonprofit, nonpartisan New York Coalition for Open Government, by several other notable local and state officials, including Governor Kathy Hochul, 3 elected officials representing parts of Erie County and the city of Buffalo. Like Restaino, the Western New York Naughty contingent drew the coalition's ire for failing to adhere to open and transparent practices, including in instances when the press or the public made formal requests for documents and other materials under the state's Freedom of Information law. The coalition started keeping its annual holiday season list in 2022. This year's list includes 10 naughty nominees and 10 officials in governments deemed nice for their pro-transparency efforts, such as advocating for the release of public information or for the right of the public to speak during and participate in public meetings. The rankings were released during a press conference on Thursday by attorney Paul Wolf, the coalition's founder, who currently serves as its president emeritus. The list was not ranked in any particular order. However, Wolf noted that both Restaino and Hochul have now made 3 appearances each on the naughty side. One of the ways we highlight these issues is this naughty and night list, Wolf said. Just as Santa Claus keeps a list, so do we. Restaino earned his spot for comments he made during a weekly update from his City Hall office in November, when he said his administration was not refusing requests for information from the Gazette, but rather ignoring them while suggesting he was not pleased with the newspaper's coverage of recent development announcements on Main Street or improvements in the city's financial condition. We're not refusing, we're just ignoring, Restaino said during the update, which was posted to the mayor's office YouTube channel. We're ignoring for these reasons. For those reasons, I'm explaining to you. We're ignoring the fact that you simply don't want to report these things that we think are important information for residents to know about the city. Instead, you like to kind of make up stories as you go. There's no refusal. It's just we've chosen to put the information in the right space and ignore what is obviously an outlet that is trying to make as much trouble as they can. On Thursday, Wolf said it's not a good look for the leader of the Falls, while noting Restaino has also had what he described as problems with complying with FOIL requests filed by sitting members of the City Council. He made a point of saying he's not refusing to respond to their FOIL requests, he's just ignoring them, Wolf said, referring to comments made by the mayor regarding the newspaper. It's just a terrible way for a public official to handle FOIL requests. Hochul once again received criticism for the coalition, this time for what Wolf said was her decision to veto two bills that he said would result in improvements in the way FOIL requests are handled by state agencies. He also expressed concern that Hochul may soon veto another bill calling for greater transparency as it relates to information related to the formation of limited liability companies in New York. While Hochul previously vowed to support changes in state law that would make it easier to obtain public information in New York, however, Wolf said she has so far failed to follow through on her commitment with real action. When she became governor, she promised a new era of transparency, but that hasn't happened, Wolf said. Other local names and entities named to the coalition's naughty list includes Erie County Sheriff John Garcia. Wolf said the county sheriff's department has had a bad history of open government issues under Garcia that were punctuated recently by the department being sued by the New York Times, the Buffalo News, and the Partnership for Public Good for failing to comply with FOIL requests for information regarding to the investigation of narcotics chief DJ Granville, who was suspended earlier this year after pleading guilty to reckless driving and leaving the scene of an accident after a vehicle he was driving struck 7 vehicles in the city of Buffalo. The city of Buffalo, under former Mayor Byron Brown, Wolf said the city had a woeful track record when it came to complying with the Freedom of Information Law requests from the press and public. In recent months, following Brown's exit for his current role as CEO and president of Western Regional Off-Track Betting, Wolf said the city's management of public information has not improved under acting Buffalo Mayor Chris Scanlon. New York State Senator Pat Gallivan, the Republican and former Erie County Sheriff who represents Buffalo as part of his Senate district, made the coalition's list for introducing a piece of legislation that would roll back a hard-fought effort to require the public release of police disciplinary records by adding a clause that would require a court order before any such request could be granted. The town of Evans. The coalition criticized town leaders for failing to make public a settlement reached with a former town supervisor who filed a defamation lawsuit against the town. Wolf said the settlement was done behind closed doors and never appeared on an agenda for any public town meeting and never came up for a vote. The nice half of the coalition's list is intended to raise public's awareness about elected officials, residents, municipalities, and public agencies that have taken steps in the past year to improve the public's understanding of what's happening in their state and local government. This year's list was highlighted by attorney Mike Brandy, who used an obscure section of the state's FOIL law to help successfully prosecute a public official in Saratoga Springs on 3 counts of unlawful obstruction of public access to records. Wolf said the case, which resulted in the public official being found guilty following a trial and being sentenced to pay a $660 fine, was the first of its kind in history. It's a start, said Brandy, who participated in Thursday's coalition press conference. Hopefully people will take notice of this and give a little more respect to FOIL laws when they get their requests. The coalition nice list also included a nod for New York Civil Liberties Union for its year-long efforts to convince the New York State Court of Appeals that police disciplinary records, whether the claims were substantiated or not, are subject to FOIL, as well as a contingent of USA Today journalists led by reporter Beryl Lipton, who provided extensive coverage on their newspaper's effort to publish law enforcement disciplinary records in New York. Moving on, under the commentary section, let's read a commentary by Jackie Davis, The Advent Blessing of Joy. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, 'tis the season to be jolly. What? Can it really be that Christmas is next week? I look at the calendar and marvel at how quickly this month has gone by. This year, I decked the halls of the Davis home in stages, resisting the retail urges to hurry past the autumn holidays. It gave me sweet joy as I watched the way each room took on the look and feel of Christmas with every box of decorations emptied. This year, decorating for Christmas was truly a labor of love filled with memories as I arranged wreaths, silk poinsettias, garlands, candle, twinkling lights, inspirational Christmas books, classic Santas, devotional, and more in every nook and cranny. Now, with presents under the tree, artfully decorated by my husband, my heart is warmed with joy, knowing that we will soon celebrate the birth of Jesus, the Savior of the world. This is the third week of Advent as we count down the days leading up to Christmas. Each Sunday, a candle is lit on the Advent wreath in churches and homes around the world, reminding us that we are actually preparing our hearts to celebrate the arrival of Emmanuel, which means God with us. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld in his glory, the glory as his only begotten Son, full of grace, full of truth. This week's Advent candle is a candle of joy. I'm reminded that this kind of joy is not dependent upon having perfect conditions in our daily lives. The scripture says that in God's presence is fullness and joy. You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Coming intentionally into the presence of God is possible anytime, any place, anywhere by the power of the Holy Spirit. I have found great joy in the midst of stressful circumstances and situations far beyond my control when I reach out to God. Silent prayer, praise, and worship can be done where and when you need joy, because the Bible also says that joy of the Lord is your strength. I invite you to intentionally fill your heart with joy in God's presence this Christmas. You will find new wonder and amazement at as many blessings as you do. Ask him to open your eyes to see and feel his joy at Christmas, even in the midst of your holiday preparations. Enjoy this wonderful season and have a Merry Christmas. Our next article, state officials celebrate $34 million expansion at a Western New York dairy farm. Construction has begun on Edelweiss Dairy $34 million expansion in the town of Freedom in Cattaraugus County. The development comes in response to increased demands from regional dairy manufacturers, state officials said. Established in 1960, Edelweiss Dairy is the third-generation family-owned dairy operated by John Gerald Borer and his son John Michael Borer and daughter-in-law Bethany Borer. With two additional farms in Arcade and Portageville, Edelweiss constitutes a significant component of the local agricultural community. Edelweiss General Manager John Borer said, "Our family takes pride in our long-standing contribution to this farm. We appreciate the support from Empire State Development, which enables us to fulfill interesting demand for our premium product and prepare for ongoing success." To enhance capacity and operational efficiency, Edelweiss Dairy will replace its current Freedom Farm facility. The expansion marks a transition to a modernized operation, emphasizing automation, sustainability, and herd care, aligning growth initiatives with environmental stewardship and resilience. The multi-phase project reflects rising consumer demand, with Phase 1 involving construction of one barn. Phase 2 represents further investment, establishing two new 1,500 cow barns, a state-of-the-art rotary milking parlor capable of processing up to 700 cows per hour, a $21 million lagoon with cover, electrical infrastructure, upgrades, and an innovative manure and sand separation system, enabling recovery of 90% of bedding sand and reducing annual diesel consumption by approximately 18,000 gallons. The project is expected to generate 25 new jobs with an average annual wage of $75,000. Edelweiss Dairy currently milks its herd 3 times daily and produces over 150 million pounds of high-quality milk annually. In 2015, Edelweiss received the Dairy of Distinction Award, demonstrating the farm's commitment to excellence and presentation. The farm manages over 7,000 acres of cropland, cultivating corn silage, alfalfa, green haylage, high-moisture corn, dry corn, soybeans, and peas to sustain its growing herd. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Moving on now to the Thursday, December 18th issue. stating their cases. Political newcomers say that they are a better choice for the 23rd District. By Heidi Truschel Light. Residents from East Aurora, Clarence, Lockport, and towns in between gathered to hear candidates for the 23rd Congressional District discuss how they would handle issues differently from the incumbent, Nick Langworthy. King, a Republican from Owego, and Democrat Aaron Jies from Olean told more than 30 people how they would handle the office if elected. The event was organized by the nonprofit Good Neighbors Getting It Done in Western New York and moderated by Braver Angels, a National Cross Partisan volunteer group. I'm interested in how these candidates present themselves and their views, attendee Margaret Allritz of Lockport said. Calm, respectful discussion was a goal of the organization had for the event, and the candidates had no difficulty sharing the floor and even agreeing with each other. King, a retired engineer, said he was running because I can't abide the current congressman. He's not representing us, you and me. I would be a better congressman than what we have now. Nick has shown himself to be a stooge of a vindictive president. Trump is legislating by executive orders, and Langworthy is endorsing all that stuff. Describing himself as a moderate Republican, King said he believes in a fair marketplace, safe communities, and a stable future. Nick has not shown himself to be in favor of any of these things, he said. A traditional Republican is in favor of abiding by the rule of law. A traditional Republican is for affordability and opportunity. Nick voted for a $3 trillion increase in our national debt. Guys, an associate professor of theology at St. Bonaventure University, said, sometimes I'm asked what makes a career academic think they're qualified for Congress. I think there's enough career politicians in Congress. We need to understand that leadership is about service, working for other people, and fighting the corrupting influence of money. They need to think about your needs, not their donors or the online outrage machine. Nick Langworthy has never had a real job outside of politics, Gies said. His priority is to stay in office. He supports all of Donald Trump's policies. It doesn't seem like there's any policy he won't sign off on if the boss says sign off. He doesn't do public events. He doesn't publish his schedule, even after the fact. So how do you know if he's serving you? Gee said cultures in the 23rd District, from the southern tier in Owego to South Buffalo, are considered different. You've got to get around, Gee said. Moderator Jennifer Borgoli-Binis of Braver Angels described the current Congress as ineffective and asked the candidates how they would do better. Part of what's wrong with Congress is the executive branch. The Imperial President, Gee said, Congress is only interested in doing things that the president wants them to do. Reforms need to limit the influence of money in politics, he said. Reapportionment, the redistribution of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives based on changes in population, is also needed. My hope is that the current administration is breaking enough things that we might have some political will to effect some democratic change, Guy said. What you have now is a representative that feels so safe that he has no accountability to the district. He's hurting farmers, driving them out of business. In describing how he would do better, King said, I'm a firm believer in saying exactly why I do things. That's part of the engineering world where I come from. I'm willing to write down and put it out there. King said his policy positions are on his webpage. On the topic of health care, Gee said there are 3 things to shoot for. It needs to be stable, affordable, and accessible. My belief is that we need to move towards universal health care in this country. What we have now is actively falling apart. We know that if we did it right, it would not just be better, but cheaper. We need to shore up and strengthen the ACA, and we need to reform in the private sector. There's too many middlemen and too many people getting a cut. We don't have a functioning market in healthcare at all, Gies said. You can't shop. There's no price transparency. If we're expecting capitalism to solve the problem, it's not working for us. King said that as an EMS volunteer, he sees the results of the current healthcare climate up close. There's way too many people saying that they don't want to go to the hospital. They won't go. You have to twist their arm because they can't afford it. People are afraid that they're going to walk out of the hospital bankrupt. We have to simply access it in all its forms and get rid of the middleman. Moving on, 4 Republicans forced the House vote on extending ACA subsidiaries. 4 centrist Republicans broke with Speaker Mike Johnson on Wednesday and signed onto a Democratic-led petition that will force a House vote on extending for 3 years an enhanced pandemic subsidy that lowers health insurance costs for millions of Americans. The stunning move came the same day that House Republican leaders pushed to passage a health care bill that does not address the soaring monthly premiums that millions of people will soon endure. These premium hikes will occur between the tax credits for who buys insurance through the Affordable Care Act that expires at the end of the year. The developments set the stage for a renewed intra-party clash over health care in January, something Republican leaders have been working hard to avoid. The moderate Republicans were able to force the issue by signing a petition led by Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York to vote on a bill that would extend the ACA subsidies for 3 years. Republican Representatives Brian Fitzpatrick, Robert Bresnahan, and Ryan McKenzie, all from Pennsylvania, and Mike Lawler of New York, signed on Wednesday morning, pushing it to the magic number of 218. A vote on the subsidy bill could come as soon as January under House rules. Unfortunately, it is House leadership themselves that has forced this outcome, Fitzpatrick said in a statement. Johnson told reporters Wednesday that I have not lost control of the House, and he noted that Republicans have a razor-thin majority that allows a small number of members to employ procedures that would not usually be successful in getting around leadership. These are not normal times, said Johnson. The revolt against GOP leadership came after days of talk centered on the health care subsidies. Johnson had discussed allowing more politically vulnerable GOP lawmakers a chance to vote on bills that would temporarily extend the subsidies, while also adding changes such as income caps for beneficiaries. But after days of discussion, the leadership sided with more conservative wing of the party's conference, which had assailed the subsidies as propping up a failed ACA program, which is widely known as Obamacare. House Republicans pushed ahead Wednesday on a 100-plus page health care package without the subsidies. Instead, the measure focused on long-sought GOP proposals designed to expand insurance coverage options for small businesses and the self-employed. The bill passed on a mostly party-line vote of 216 to 211. Republicans Thomas Massie from Kentucky joined with Democrats in voting against the measure. Fitzpatrick and Lawler tried to add a temporary extension to the subsidies to the bill, but were denied. Our only regret was a floor vote on the compromise so that the American people's voice could be heard on this issue. That request was rejected. Then, at the request of House leadership, I, along with my colleagues, filed multiple amendments and testified at length to those amendments, Fitzpatrick said. House leadership then decided to reject every single one of these amendments. As I've stated many times before, the only policy that is worse than a clean 3-year extension without any reforms is a policy of complete expiration without any bridges, Fitzpatrick said. Lawler, in a social media post, similarly said that the failure of leadership to permit a vote has left him with no choice but to sign the petition. I don't like them. It's not the way it's supposed to work, Johnson said of the discharge petitions. Jeffries, for several weeks, had called on Republicans to sign his discharge petition. He particularly challenged Republicans in competitive congressional districts to join the efforts if they really wanted to prevent steep premium increases for their constituents. Moving along, Buck Rogers star Jill Gerard died at the age of 82. Jill Gerard, who played television's husky sci-fi hero William Buck Rogers soon after the Star Wars franchise took hold in the late 1970s, has died. He was 82. Gerard died Tuesday in hospice as a result of a rare aggressive form of cancer, said his manager, Tina Presley-Borick. His wife, Janet Gerard, posted a posthumous Facebook message he left behind for fans that read in part, "Don't waste your time on anything that doesn't thrill you or bring you love. See you somewhere in the cosmos." Gerard starred in NBC's campy Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, which ran for 2 seasons from 1979 to 1981. A theatrical film based on the series also delighted youngsters and their parents alike. It was Rogers' second turn on TV. Gerard was married and divorced 4 times before his current wife, Janet. He had a son, actor Gilbert Vincent Gerard, with model and actor Connie Selica. Their divorce included a bitter custody battle for Gibb, who was born in 1981. Selica was granted main custody. "My journey has taken me from Arkansas to New York to Los Angeles and finally to my home in North Georgia with my amazing wife Janet of 18 years, Gerard wrote in a post put on Facebook after his death. "It's been a great ride, but inevitably one that comes to a close, as mine has." Moving on, the Buffalo Zoo welcomes a new giant anteater, Tupi. Staff is hopeful that he will produce an offspring with the female anteater. The Buffalo Zoo has announced the arrival and debut of Tupi, a 7-year-old male giant anteater who came to the facility on October 28th. Tupi was born on July 30th, 2018 at the Connecticut Beardsley Zoo and later moved to the Nashville Zoo in November 2020. He is now settling into his new home in Buffalo, where he will play an important role in the conservation of his species. As part of a species survival plan breeding recommendation, Tupi will be paired with the zoo's resident female giant anteater, Maria. While Tupi has not yet sired any offspring, the zoo's animal care and conservation teams are hopeful that this pairing will change that. With giant anteaters producing only 1 pup per year, careful managed breeding programs are critical to their survival. Giant anteaters are currently classified as vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, with an estimated 5,000 individuals remaining in the wild. Their population continues to decline due to habitat loss, hunting, and vehicle strikes. Anteaters are especially susceptible to road collisions because of their poor vision, slow movement, and nocturnal behavior. Conservation efforts in their native range are exploring solutions such as wildlife corridors with highways, underpasses, and overpasses to help reduce these threats. Giant anteaters are the largest of the 4 anteater species, growing 6 to 8 feet long and weighing between 60 and 100 pounds. They're easily recognized by their large snouts and 2-foot-long tongues, which can flick in and out up to 150 times per minute. Using powerful claws, they rip open ant and termite nests, making the insects almost their exclusive diet. They're native to Central and South America. Giant anteaters can live in both tropical rainforests and arid grasslands as long as sufficient food is available. Tupi is housed in the M&T Bank Rainforest Falls during regular zoo hours. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Lockport Union-Sun Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Moving on to the Wednesday, December 17th issue. 40 years for a fatal Lockport shooting. A Lockport man was sentenced to 40 years to life on Tuesday for his role in a fatal 2023 shooting. Joshua Chandler was found guilty of second-degree murder, first-degree assault, and second-degree criminal possession of a weapon in connection with the shooting death of Rakeem Hamilton, 27 of Lockport, following a 2-week-long trial in September. Acting Supreme Court Justice Mario Jacoby sentenced the defendant to 25 years to life for the murder, 10 years for the assault, and 5 years for the illegal gun possession, and ordered that all of the sentence run consecutively to one another. Lockport Police Patrol said they responded to shots fired call on July 2nd, 2023, outside a bodega and the first officers on the scene said they found the female victim shot in the face. The woman was rushed by ambulance to the Erie County Medical Center in Buffalo. Where she was treated for her wounds. Other responding officers reported locating a spent shell casing and then finding the body of Hamilton about 100 feet from where the female victim was located. Hamilton was pronounced dead at the scene. In testimony on the final day of the trial, Chandler took the stand to explain to the jury that he feared an encounter with Hamilton and shot at him to protect himself. Chandler said that as he came around the corner of a bodega at Locust and Walnut Streets at around 10 p.m. on July 3rd, he locked eyes with Hamilton, who was sitting in a nearby car in front of the store. He said he saw Hamilton make a move and told the jurors he fired his gun at him. Hamilton died as a result of wounds he suffered in the hail of bullets. The spray of bullets from Chandler's gun also struck the female passenger in Hamilton's car. The women survived the shooting and testified during the trial. Investigators said the shooting was targeted and not a random act of violence. The sentence in this case ensures that a very dangerous criminal will be off the streets for a long time, Niagara County District Attorney Brian Seaman said. The case was investigated by the Lockport Police Department and prosecuted by the first Assistant District Attorney Doreen Hoffman and Assistant District Attorney Christine Savoie. Moving on. Our next article. The U.S. Capitol unveiled a statue of civil rights icon Barbara Rose Johns. It replaces the statue of Robert E. Lee that was removed several years ago. An unveiling ceremony of the statue representing Virginia in the Capitol was taking place in Emancipation Hall, featuring Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson, Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Republican Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, and Virginia's Congressman delegation. Johnson said more than 200 members of John's family was on hand, listening as the ceremony opened with a rendition of How Great Thou Art, performed by the Eastern Senior High School Choir in Washington. We are here to honor one of America's true trailblazers, a woman who embodied the essence of the American spirit in her fight for liberty and justice and equal treatment under the law, the indomitable Barbara Rose Johns, Johnson said. Johns was 16 years old in 1951 when she led a student strike for equal education at R.R. Moton High School in Farmville, Virginia. The students' cause gained the support of NAACP lawyers who filed a lawsuit that would become one of the 5 cases that the U.S. Supreme Court reviewed in Brown versus the Board of Education. The High Court's landmark 1954 decision declared separate but equal public schools unconstitutional. Johns later married the Reverend William Powell and became Barbara Rose Johns Powell, raised 5 children, and was a librarian in the Philadelphia Public Schools. She died at 56 in 1991. The statue shows the young John standing at the side of a lectern, holding a tattered book over her head. Its pedestal is engraved with the words, "Are we going to just accept these conditions, or are we going to do something about it?" It also features a quote from the book of Isaiah, "And a little child shall lead them." In a statement Monday, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia said the Bible verse reminds him of John's bravery and leadership. "I'm thrilled that millions of visitors to the U.S. Capitol, including many young people, will now walk by her statue and learn about her story," Kaine said. "May she continue to inspire generations to stand up for equality and justice." The statue replaces one of Lee that was removed in December 2020 from the Capitol, where it had represented Virginia for 111 years. The removal occurred during a time of renewed national attention over Confederate monuments after the death of George Floyd and was relocated to the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. The Commonwealth of Virginia will now be properly represented by an actual patriot who embodied the principle of liberty and justice for all, and not a traitor who took up arms against the United States to preserve the brutal institution of childhood slavery, Jeffrey said at the ceremony. The Johns piece is part of the National Statuary Hall collection at the Capitol, in which each state can contribute 2 statues. The other statue representing Virginia is of George Washington. National Statuary Hall displays 35 of the statues. Others are in the crypt, the Hall of Columns, and the Capitol Visitor Center, Johnson said. The John statue will be placed in the crypt. Former Democratic Virginia Governor Ralph Northam had requested the removal of the Lee statue. In December 2020, a state commission recommended replacing Lee's statue with a statue of John's. The John statue, sculpted by Stephen Weitzman of Maryland, received final approval from the architect of the Capitol and the Joint Committee on the Libraries in July. John's is also featured in a sculpture at the Virginia Civil Rights Memorial outside the state capitol in Richmond. Next article, President Trump has added 5 more countries to the travel ban. 15 countries are now included. The Trump administration is expanding the travel ban to include 5 more countries and impose new limits on others. This move Tuesday is part of ongoing efforts to tighten U.S. entry standards for travel and immigration. The decision follows the arrest of an Afghan national suspect in the shooting of 2 National Guard troops over Thanksgiving weekend. In June, President Donald Trump announced that citizens of 12 countries would be banned from visiting the United States, and those from 7 others would face restrictions. The decision resurrected a hallmark policy of his first term. At the time, the ban included Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, and heightened the restrictions of visitors from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. On Tuesday, the Republican administration announced it was expanding the list of countries whose citizens are banned from entering the U.S. to Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, South Sudan, and Syria. The administration also fully restricted travel on people with Palestinian Authority-issued travel documents. An additional 15 countries are also being added to the list of countries facing partial restrictions. Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Dominica, Gabon, Gambia, Malawi, Mauritania, Nigeria, Senegal, Tanzania, Tonga, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The Trump administration said its announcements of the expanded travel ban that many of the countries from which it was restricting travel had widespread corruption, fraudulent or unreliable civil documents, and criminal records that made it difficult to vet their citizens for travel to the U.S. It also said some countries had high rates of people overstaying their visas, refusing to take back their citizen who the U.S. wished to deport, or had a general lack of stability and government control, which made vetting difficult. The restrictions and limitations imposed by the proclamation are necessary to prevent the entry of foreign nationals about whom the United States lacks sufficient information to assess the risks they pose, garner cooperation from foreign governments, enforce our immigration laws, and advance other important foreign policy. National security and counterterrorism objectives, read the White House proclamation announcing the changes. The Afghan man accused of shooting the 2 National Guards troops near the White House has pleaded not guilty to murder and assault charges. Next article. The last U.S. cents sold at auction for a sum of $16.76 million were worth a pretty penny. To those who argue that the U.S. penny has no value, some coin collectors beg to differ. In fact, they doled out millions for the final pennies circulated in the U.S. before the government ended the cents production back in November. The U.S. Mint sold 232 3-cent sets of a whopping sum of $16.76 million at an auction last Thursday hosted by Stack's Bowers Galleries. The 232nd set, containing the last 3 pennies ever made, sold for $800,000. That bidder also got the 3 dies that struck those Lincoln cents. John Kralovich, director of Numismatic Americana at Stack Bowers, said it was the kind of auction where you don't know the item's market value until people make their bids. I've been going to coin auctions for 40 years, and I can tell you I've never seen anything like this because there's never been anything like this, Kralovich said. Stack Bowers president Brian Candrella said they captured the public's imagination like few rare coins we've ever handled. When it was first introduced in 1793, a penny could buy a biscuit or a piece of candy. Now, most of them are tucked away into jars or junk drawers. They can also be relics of history for coin collectors. Each set comprised 225 pennies struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and a 24-karat gold penny to cap off the end of an era. Each cent also bore a unique omega symbol. There were 232 grouplets to reflect each year that the coin had been embedded in American culture. American culture has incorporated the penny into our lexicon, into our pop culture, into all of its stuff, Kralovich said. And I think for a lot of people, the ending of production of cents for circulation is an item of nostalgia. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the current issues of the Lockport Union-Sun Journal. Your reader has been Debbie. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Wall Street Journal Off-Duty section. At 7 o'clock, we got Harper's Magazine, and at 8 o'clock, we have Sports Illustrated. Stay tuned for these readings and more throughout the day. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Radio readers broadcast daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability who are provided reading radios. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio reading broadcasts throughout the city of Buffalo, western New York, and southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,